So it's a pleasure for me to introduce Dr. Gwyn Kirk, who has taught classes on courses at several different academic institutions, including the University of Oregon, where she is a visiting faculty in women's and gender studies this year. Her articles on feminism, or feminist ecology, militarism, foreign policy, and feminist organizing have appeared in many anthologies and journals. She is the co-author of Women's Lives, Multicultural Perspectives, used in women's classrooms nationwide. She's the founding member of Women for Genuine Security, a Bay Area group that is part of an international collaboration of scholars and activists across the Asian Pacific region who oppose militarism and promote genuine security for a sustainable world. Gwyn Kirk.
Thank you. Do I need this? I don't need this at all.
That's fine.
Okay. Okay.
You can either hit the space bar.
Yeah.
Probably that one's easiest.
I'll do that. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Well, I'd like to thank the committee very much for inviting me to talk this evening and confront this huge topic, let alone confronting militarism. So I feel like we should take a kind of deep breath after the slides we've seen and kind of absorb the reality of some of the things that Anita Weiss has been telling us. In just this one small place, so many thousands of miles away from here, and knowing that unfortunately some of those realities are multiplied in other places. So I think it's something that's really remarkable, and I'm so glad to see so many people here tonight. This is a tough subject to tackle. My students this term keep telling me that. Oh, another depressing topic, they say. And I'm afraid I'm also here to bring some bad news in some ways. But I also think that knowing the enormity of what's happening, especially what's being done in our name, and often with our tax money, is something that we absolutely have to know about. And that knowledge can also help us to reach out to others, to work in collaboration across lines from our own communities, and to put out our own ideas about a security that does not depend on militarism and war. So that's mostly what I want to talk about. There's some facts and figures. Some of you may know them. Forgive me if it's old hat to you. It might be useful for students who aren't familiar with them. And I'm going to have to take my glasses on and off as well. So when I think about militarism, I think it's this big system that links institutions, the military, its various practices, its values, and cultures that all in some way take their meaning from war. Militarism is much bigger than any one war. It's systemic, it's entrenched, it's long-term, and in the United States, it's bipartisan. When he left office in 1960 or so, President, also General Dwight Eisenhower, warned against what he then described as the military-industrial complex, that connection between militarism, industry, and the Congress. Nowadays, I think we probably need to say the military, corporate, congressional, academic, media complex to tie in all the different organizations who in some way or another are keeping these priorities going when so many people are opposed to them. So as we confront militarism, we're confronting various of its dimensions, and this is work that I know is being done by many organizations nationwide in this country, by organizations in other countries, and right here in Eugene. So I just wanted to start with thinking about the economy. The United States contributes 41% to this absolutely staggering world total of whatever it is, $1 trillion, I'm not very good at big numbers, dollars in 2008, overkill in every stretch of the imagination. The US Department of Defense describes the Pentagon as the oldest, largest, busiest, and most successful US company, boasting a bigger budget than ExxonMobil, Ford, or General Motors, and with a wider geographical scope. We're talking about trade in weapons, we're talking about corporate profits and profiteering, we're talking about budget priorities, where 50% of federal discretionary money is being spent on the military in one way or another. And this would be proposed to be $737 billion in the forthcoming fiscal year. So it's $2 billion a day. I'd like to ask you right now, if you had $2 billion today, how would you spend it, knowing that when you wake up tomorrow morning, you've got another $2 billion, you can spend that, and the next day, you know, Sunday, you've got another $2 billion, and it goes on. So these are mind-boggling numbers. And so a lot of work is already going on, and there needs to be so much more to do with dealing with this military budget. Here's a group who were protesting outside the Republican National Congress, drawing attention to pigs at the trough, in this case Halliburton. When it comes to jobs, the military budget actually generates the fewest jobs compared to other kinds of government spending. It generates more profits, but you'll see that mass transit on the extreme right, education, healthcare, home weatherization, and so on, all generate more jobs. So when we're talking about jobs, and we need jobs, we don't need military spending to create them. When we look at another kind of comparison, how much would it take to eradicate hunger in the world? People have estimated $30 billion a year. It sounds like a huge amount of money, except I just told you what's going into the military budget. So you can see here about as much as the world spends on the military every 8 days. There's plenty of money. And this outfit with many pockets from an anti-military fashion show, you know, has the person actually giving away the money to all the kinds of things that people need. Political dimensions of militarism are pretty obvious. Definition of security as national security. The whole wimp factor in politics, you can't be soft on defense. Prevailing ideas of the international relations assume a hostile environment in which sovereign, self-interested states seek their own security through a balance of power. Obama has said that we'll freeze domestic spending, right, for the next period of time. We'll keep military spending going. That's part of his not being soft on defense, which we also saw from both him and Hillary Clinton as part of their campaigns. I know many people were very excited about getting Obama elected, and these are difficult times now to face the reality that his campaign promises are very different from a lot of what is happening. So the political dimension, they're running an empire, as at the conference of our title of the conference suggests. Obama maybe has a slightly different look, but still running an empire nevertheless. There's a cultural dimension to militarism, which I think in this country and other countries too, which I think is really important. Partly comes out of, you know, everyday gender socialization, encouraging children to use certain kinds of war toys, movies, video games, Hollywood movies, such as staple war movies. And I like this cartoon. Do you have a female action figure that speaks out against discrimination in war? The girl is asking in the toy store. The storekeeper looks a little bemused. And again, as more women go into the military, 15% now on average, so more advertising through toys, through images. Here's G.I. Jane as a helicopter pilot. Here's a video game that's being marketed to girls. Although, of course, in reality, the military is mostly being marketed to boys. And the fuzzy area between video games and recruitment is something that you can kind of see in some of these sorts of websites, video games. Very specific targeting of different communities. I'm using targeting there deliberately. It's not a word I usually like to use. An appeal to family, that family would support people going into the military. Specific budget for Spanish language ads, and a lot of argument that Latino community was, quote, underrepresented in the military. But also the cultural stuff, I'll wage wars on my large paws, says, this ad for some kind of skin cream. Lingerie and t-shirts and all the rest of it come in camouflage. So do condoms with the byline, don't let them see you coming. So what does it mean to be in a country at war, spending this kind of money on military when all this kind of stuff gets absorbed into everyday life, is a question I want to ask. And how do we demilitarize this kind of everyday culture? Many people are going into the military for a job. Of course, they're following the money. Most people in the enlisted ranks amongst women are women of color. Most women at the officer level are white, and most officers tend to be more career military compared to people who go into the enlisted ranks. Women in combat in a new way in Iraq, being used to search women and go work with groups of Marines and other outfits. I don't know whether you've seen the film Lioness that's going around, relatively new film. It shows the activities of Team Lioness and raises a lot of questions about women in combat. The military has always been put forward, right, as a masculinist institution. Combat is something that's been defined as male. You don't see the figure of the wife and mother so well. Oh, you do. You see it better than I do on my screen in this one. But a new emphasis on family that the army is trying to, and the military in general, is trying to come to terms with how to reconcile the contradiction of its, quote, manpower requirements, some of which are being fulfilled by hiring women, and its ethos and kind of overall culture. Here's a little cartoon from an article written by Cynthia Enlow in Ms. Magazine. Women's sexuality is served up as if it was fast food, she argues, thinking of women who are working in bars and massage parlors and so on around bases, often in Asia, and that's one of the areas that I've done most of my work. You'll see that instead of the medals here, this high-ranking person is sporting a little row of women on his uniform. Also, I think when we think about, and Anita's presentation really brought this home to me very strongly, the impacts of war on women are quite specific in various gender terms. It makes it easy sometimes to see women as victims. That's not what I got from your presentation at all, showing us women who are thinking about how to improve their lives, how to improve their communities, how to deal with the chaos around them. This photograph shows Afghan women in Pakistan refugee camps for Afghan families, deliberating about what they need. Remember, one of the big justifications for this war, both in Afghanistan and Iraq, put forward by President Bush and Tony Blair, was that it was going to liberate women. A really cynical and calculated appeal, I think, to us, people in the United States, that we maybe would get behind this war if we thought that was really going to happen. Not only has that not happened, but in many cases it's put women back a very long time from where they were. It made those two look like they were the world's biggest feminists, for a short period of time. And also the fact that this woman as victim is a kind of regular media story when we don't have direct contact with women's organizations in other parts of the world. We don't know how much they're doing, how much they're thinking, how smart they are, how much they know about how to solve their own problems. It's easier for us to kind of fall back on this idea that it could be liberating, that war could be liberating. Okay, so moving on from here. Yes, a couple of other things to say about this gender thing. It's becoming more complicated. I think there is a gender gap around gun control and around militarism in general. Organizations like Code Pink and WAND and Women's International League for Peace and Freedom have based their work around women's concern for children and community and the future. Abu Ghraib, however, showed that under orders, US military women are just as capable of committing atrocities, which had been assumed to be a male prerogative. So there's also, I think, and perhaps this is so amongst some younger women, I've encountered it in, talking to students this term, not wanting to be restricted, wanting to be able to go into the military if that's what you want to do, wanting to be able to go into combat and so on. So, these are questions I have that I think we have to confront if we're thinking about militarism broadly. So moving on now to the second half of that big title and thinking a little bit about empire. This is how the United States military sees the world. It's divided up into a number of commands. Africa Command is the latest one. European Command, Southern Command, the Northern Command is North America, and then the Pacific Command is the two halves of this map, the left-hand side and the right-hand side. It goes from virtually the US coast all the way across the Pacific to India. It's absolutely huge command. Headquarters are in Hawaii, and it's estimated by the military in their base structure report in 2005 that there are 737 bases in different countries around the world. Other commentators and researchers and experts reckon that that's actually closer to 1,000 because quite a number were not counted in that 2005 report. So you have to ask a lot of questions. Why are they there? How are they connected to the quest for resources? What's the history of their alliances? How does the United States enter into agreements with all these different countries to have military bases on their territory? How are they bribed or flattered or cajoled according to whatever are the shifting needs? This is not a very clear image, and I have actually extra copies of it if people like it. It's a map that shows bases in lots of different places. Look for the dots and the sprinkling of the dots. Some of them are on key places which are like strategic islands. Vieques in Puerto Rico is one. Hawaii itself, a state, is another. The island of Guam in the Western Pacific is another one. And I want to mention Guam particularly because it's facing a huge military buildup right now. The idea that troops would be moved from Okinawa in the southern part of Japan, 8,000 Marines, plus contractors, plus support workers, plus family members, would make about 50,000 people being moved to Guam. Guam is 30 miles long and 8 miles wide. It is a very small island that already has a third of its land taken up by US bases. The proposal is to expand that to 40% or so. Guam doesn't have another strong industry. It has some tourism, but it's had military bases for a long time. It's been a US territory for over 100 years, since 1898, when the US got Guam from Spain. And so I'm just mentioning it partly because there's somebody here in this audience tonight who introduced himself to me, who comes from Guam, and also because it's one of the issues that the network I'm part of is actually currently trying to work on, to see what we can do to oppose the military buildup. So what would security without empire look like? When I talk to people about this, and perhaps you too, and maybe many people in this room, people come up with a remarkably similar list. Nourishing food, clean water, uncontaminated air, health and well-being, work or some form of livelihood, personal safety, having a strong community, meaningful opportunities for making decisions, the kind of grassroots democracy, not just elections where some very rich person, runs against some other very rich person. In the 90s, the United Nations Development Program focused on a human security paradigm. And I think it's useful just to think about it, because so often when people say security, we're talking about military, it's assumed that we're talking about nation states. And nation-state security does not guarantee the security of ordinary people, and it does not guarantee the security of the planet, or the environment. In fact, it jeopardizes all of that. So their model of human security has 4 dimensions. The environment must be able to sustain life. People must have basic economic needs met. Culture must be respected, not to dominate other cultures, but there must be some respect, and a prevention from avoidable harm. And these things are interrelated, so that, for example, you can't just focus on the environment if nobody has any jobs, right? And you can't just find jobs if they're all going to be polluting. So it's both a series of goals and also a kind of methodology for evaluating policy. And so I think that one of the things we need to do, and probably many of you are already doing this, is just redefine this whole thing about what security is, because it's so ingrained, I think, in everyday ideas that security means militarism. In 2005, a group, international group of women, nominated 1,000 women from almost every country in the world as a group for the Nobel Peace Prize. Unfortunately, they didn't win it. But what did happen was that their work was showcased, a video was made about them. There is a website that showcases a lot of their work. The group is called Peace Women Across the Globe, and they had a very broad way of thinking about peace. And I think this is the kind of thing that, people in so many communities want to work towards, and that gives us a kind of meaningful life, knowing that in some small way we're able to make some little difference in our own community, encouraging others to do the same in their community, opening up space in the dialogue and debate about all this. So I won't read them all. Those of you who are sitting on this side can read them. If people want to know more about them later, I'll be happy to talk about it. There are many of us. One of the things Tom Hayden said this afternoon at a discussion downtown was, we don't have the institutions and we don't have the money, but we do have numbers. This is a slide from one of the many rallies in March 2003 that took place in countries around the world opposing United States bombing of Iraq. This one was in Paris. And so I think it's always useful to remember that there are many people who know that resources could be used in sensible ways that would safeguard our everyday lives and communities. So that's why I'm just putting that one up there. And one last thing is about something that's like a practical vision. This is a person, Betty Burks. She was for a while the U.S. director of the U.S. branch of Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. She's one of those 1,000 women who was nominated in 2005 for the Peace Prize. And she says, "We will succeed in building a strong base for transformation when together we weave a vision that in practice offers a way of living so vital it is impossible to resist." And I think that's part of the challenge of doing this sort of work about confronting militarism in different ways. I'd like to thank everybody in this room for the parts that you are doing in that way. For me personally, it's immeasurably enriched my life and brought all kinds of amazing people into my life. It's a good way of living your life, even though at times it can seem like things are going backwards and terrible things are happening in the world. I'm actually, a great believer that there are many smart, sensible, creative people in the world, and if we could get together more and more effectively, we could not only inspire and encourage one another, but also, I hope, ultimately make some change. Thanks.
So we're a little behind schedule, so we're going to shorten the question period. What I'd like is to, unfortunately, take one question for each of the two speakers, and then we'll have a 10-minute break. And during that break, I encourage you, if you have questions of them, to corner them and ask them directly. I'm sure they'd be glad to talk with you directly. So I'm going to turn this mic over to Dean, who will take it to somebody who has a question for Anita, and then somebody a question for Gwyn.
I'll address Gwyn because Anita's concerned with the other side of the world, but the military buildup in Colombia seems particularly ominous as a change in U.S. policy in that region, and it seems like it's starting to get a little crazy down there. I don't have had any comment.
Well, it's not an area that I know a huge amount about, but I know that there is a plan to put U.S. bases in Colombia, already a very complicated situation. At the same time, Honduras and Ecuador have kicked out U.S. bases. So, and there's, I think, quite a big movement in Latin America that focuses on the base in Colombia. So I know that the Fellowship of Reconciliation has a Latin America program that is very focused on working around the proposed U.S. bases in Colombia, and there is a huge peace movement in Colombia with many women's peace organizations and other peace organizations. So it's something that I personally don't know a lot about. I would encourage people who want to know more to look it up. Thanks for the question.
This is for me. This is for Anita.
what I got out of Anita's presentation is some ambiguity about how women are being treated during the war and some of the contradictions. And I know it's gotten to the point that last fall during the I'll put it in quotes, debate about further escalating in Afghanistan, there seemed to be some debate among the various women's groups as to whether escalating would actually help Afghan women or not. And so there seems to be some confusion here. My personal opinion is that the American military is the last organization in the world that you would want to help liberate women. And I'm having a hard time seeing how a further war, except in very unusual circumstances, can benefit women at all.
Okay, and I'm sorry if there was any ambiguity, and there probably was, because as I started to talk, I realized I needed to give some more background, and then I needed to give more background, so sorry if I didn't get to clarifying certain things. First of all, let me make it clear, what happens in Pakistan, what happens in Afghanistan are two really different things. The issues in Pakistan are connected to that Pakistanis want their state to act on their behalf and get rid of this militarism that has emerged for lots of different reasons. None of this has helped women. All of it has, without question, scapegoated really women by saying female education's bad, women have to cover themselves, they have to wear the veil, and these women are fighting back and saying, no, we can't do that. In the case of Afghanistan, again, I mean, the last people in the world who can come up with a solution is associated with anybody in the military, and especially people who are fighting for an army from another country. I've long been an advocate of U.S. greater involvement and engagement in Afghanistan for helping to rebuild and even build roads, for helping to teach Afghans how to farm. And don't think that we're already going to be teaching people who are farmers. These are people who were displaced ever since 1979, and they don't know how to farm, and they don't have the resources for it, men as well as women. So absolutely, anytime that it's military engagement, women get scapegoated, women become, sexually objectified, and I think that the U.S. pledging more involvement in Afghanistan in terms of human security, and I'm definitely on the same page of human security as Gwyn is, but in terms of providing military, fighting and shooting against Afghans, I mean, when Holbrooke was asked in early fall what military success for the United States would mean in Afghanistan, I think this is one of the most irresponsible statements I have ever heard anybody say. And he said, I don't know what it would look like, but I'm sure we'll know what it is when we see it. That's a good comment to close on. Thank you all. Sorry there's no more. We can both talk during the break, or you know how to get in touch with both of us.